The drilling probes descended through layers of lunar regolith, sending back data that made the Zathari scientists click their mandibles in disbelief. What should have been uniform mineral compositions suddenly gave way to engineered materials unlike anything in the Galactic database. "Admiral, you need to see this," called out Science Officer Turvak, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic display. "These patterns aren't natural formations. They're radiation shields, incredibly advanced ones." Admiral Vexnar floated over in the low gravity of the observation deck, his iridescent exoskeleton catching the light of the nearby gas giant. "How deep?" "Nearly 8 kilometers beneath the surface. And there's more. The composition changes. These aren't just shields. They're dynamic systems that appear to be evolving." The bridge fell silent. Evolution was a natural process, not something that happened to construction materials. Yet the evidence was unmistakable. These barriers had been adapting to changes in the lunar environment for centuries. As the drilling probes approached the final layer, unexpected energy signatures flared across the sensors. The humans had detected the intrusion. Within moments, the lunar surface around the Zathari landing site transformed. What had appeared to be natural craters reconfigured, revealing concealed defense platforms that rose smoothly from the dust. "Hold position." Vexnar commanded the fleet. "No aggressive movements." The communications officer's antennae twitched frantically. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission, in perfect standard Galactic." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that reflected confidence rather than fear. "This is Governor Elena Chen of New Terra. Your drilling activities have breached our outer security perimeter. State your intentions, Zathari visitors." Vexnar stepped forward, careful to display proper diplomatic posture. "I am Admiral Vexnar of the Zathari Exploration Fleet. We detected anomalous readings and investigated according to standard protocol. We had no knowledge of a human settlement here." Chen's expression remained measured. "And yet you continued drilling after detecting our shields." "Scientific curiosity," Vexnar admitted. "Your colony doesn't appear in any registry. The Terran Confederation claims to account for all human settlements." A slight smile crossed Chen's face. "The Confederation doesn't know everything about humanity, Admiral. Neither do you." She paused, seeming to consider something. "Since you found us, protocol dictates we should meet. You may bring a delegation of 5 to coordinates we'll transmit. No weapons, no sampling equipment." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "It's a trap," Security Chief Kazalor hissed. "Humans are notoriously unpredictable." Vexinar's upper limbs made the gesture equivalent to a human shake of the head. If they wanted to attack, those defense platforms would have fired already. He turned to his senior staff. "They've been hidden here for centuries, developing who knows what technologies in isolation. This could be the greatest xenoanthropological discovery since we found the precursor ruins on Bellerophon." As the delegation prepared to descend, Vexnar studied the scans again. The human biosignatures numbered in the thousands, a stable population that had somehow thrived in complete isolation. Every textbook on human physiology and psychology suggested this should be impossible. Humans were social creatures, dependent on expansion and external resources. Yet here they were, hidden beneath the dust of an unremarkable moon, waiting to reveal whatever impossible things they had become. The luminescent flower in the child's hand pulsed gently, its petals changing color in response to the electromagnetic field naturally emitted by Zathari bodies, something that shouldn't be detectable without advanced scientific equipment, let alone responded to by a simple plant. "Navy, that's enough," Governor Chen said gently, though her eyes never left Admiral Vexnar. The child nodded and stepped back, but not before offering a small bow to the visitors. "You've been studying us," Vexnar stated, mandibles clicking slowly in the Zathari expression of deep contemplation. "For how long?" "Since before we settled here," Chen replied, leading the delegation through a corridor where the walls themselves seemed to breathe. Earth's first deep space telescopes identified your homeworld's signatures 3 centuries ago. We've been monitoring galactic communications since our colony ship departed. Security Chief Kazalor's antennae stiffened in alarm. Impossible. Our encryption was innovative for its time, finished Chen with a diplomatic smile. But isolation breeds necessity, Chief Kazalor. We had 3 centuries with nothing to do but listen and learn. They entered a vast chamber where the ceiling displayed a perfect real-time image of the gas giant the moon orbited, its swirling storms rendered in breathtaking detail. Hundreds of colonists went about their business, some pausing to observe the alien visitors with curious but not fearful gazes. "You know our names, our language, our biology," said Science Officer Turvac. "Yet you chose to remain hidden. Why not establish contact? The Galactic Concord welcomes all sentient species." A tall man with intricate circuitry embedded in his temples approached, carrying what appeared to be ancient paper documents. Historical records suggested otherwise, particularly for isolated human colonies, he said, handing the papers to Chen. "I'm Dr. Marcus Wei, colony historian. We have extensive documentation of first contact scenarios between your species and others. The outcomes were inconsistent. You feared assimilation. Vexnar realized. We feared interruption." Chen corrected. New Terra was founded with a specific purpose: to develop human potential outside the constraints of existing power structures. Earth was tearing itself apart with the resource wars. The Confederation that rose afterward embraced certain technological and social paths that we found limiting. As they moved deeper into the colony, the Zathari delegation noticed subtle differences in the humans they passed. Some had eyes that reflected light like nocturnal creatures. Others moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost choreographed. None showed the physical diversity typical of standard human populations. "You've modified yourselves," whispered Turvac, her scientific training barely containing her shock. "We've improved ourselves," Chen corrected. "Each generation adapting to our environment, rather than forcing our environment to adapt to us. The Confederation banned such practices after the Gene Wars. We saw them as essential to survival." They reached a circular chamber where a model of the entire moon hung suspended in midair, layers peeling back to reveal the intricate network of caverns, tunnels, and chambers that formed New Terra. At the center was a pulsing light that seemed to beat like a heart. "What you're about to see is why we remained hidden," Chen said, placing her palm against a living panel that responded to her touch. "This is Nexus, the true heart of New Terra, and the reason your arrival was not unexpected, but right on schedule." The floor beneath them turned transparent, revealing a vast chamber below where hundreds of humans sat in meditative poses around a crystalline structure that defied description, part technology, part biology, wholly alien even to the Zathari visitors. "What is this?" Vexnar asked, unable to hide his astonishment. "The future," Chen replied simply. "And now, it's time for proper introductions." As the emergency supports grew from the walls to stabilize the cave-in area, lead scientist Kirtil approached one hesitantly, her appendages trembling with scientific excitement. The structure appeared crystalline but moved like something organic, pulsing with what could only be described as a heartbeat. "It's responding to the stress patterns," explained Dr. Eliza Okafor, New Terra's chief biotechnician. "The mycelial network that runs throughout our colony constantly monitors structural integrity and deploys reinforcement where needed." "But this is..." Kirtil struggled to find the right words in the Zathari language, then switched to Galactic Standard, living architecture. "The energy requirements alone should be impossible." Dr. Okafor smiled, running her hand along the newly formed support. "That's because you're thinking in terms of consumption rather than cooperation. These structures don't require energy, they exchange it." She led the science team deeper into the agricultural caverns, where the spiral crop formations created mesmerizing patterns. Humans worked among the plants, many using what appeared to be direct neural interfaces to communicate with monitoring systems. Our ancestors brought fewer than 500 plant species from Earth, Dr. Okafor continued. We now cultivate over 3,000, all evolved to thrive in our specific conditions. The luminous vines above us, for instance, were developed from ordinary pea plants, but now produce both food and light. Kirtil scanned the plants with her handheld device, mandibles clicking rapidly in astonishment. These photosynthetic pathways, they're unlike anything in our database. You've fundamentally altered their quantum efficiency. Necessity drives innovation, Dr. Okafor replied. When sunlight is unavailable, you must create your own or find alternatives. They paused beside what appeared to be a small lake, its water shimmering with an iridescence that reminded the Zathari of their home world's sacred pools. Tiny organisms moved through the liquid in complex, almost mathematical patterns. Our water system, Dr. Okafor said with evident pride. The microorganisms you see maintain perfect balance, purifying, enriching, and evolving the water itself. Each drop contains billions of engineered symbiotes that have been refined over generations, and they respond to the colony's needs, asked one of Kirtil's assistants. They anticipate them, corrected Dr. Okafor. The entire hydrological system is predictive, preparing nutrient balances based on crop cycles, population needs, and even individual health profiles. As they moved toward a research area, a low rumble vibrated through the cavern. Rather than causing panic, the colonists simply paused, placed their hands against the nearest wall, and continued their tasks after a moment. What was that? Admiral Vexnar asked, having rejoined the tour. Growing pains, Dr. Okafor explained. The Eastern Quadrant is undergoing accelerated terraforming this month. We're converting another cubic kilometer of lunar material into habitable space. She led them to a sealed chamber where the walls were transparent, revealing a stark contrast between processed and unprocessed lunar material. On one side was barren regolith, on the other, something transforming before their eyes. Microorganisms visibly converting the gray dust into rich soil while others released oxygen into the chamber atmosphere. This is the true marvel of New Terra, Dr. Okafor said quietly. We're not simply surviving inside this moon, we're gradually becoming one with it. Every breath we exhale feeds the transformation. Every step we take alters the molecular structure beneath us. In approximately 70 years, our projections indicate the entire moon will be habitable, inside and out. Kirtil stared at the transformation occurring beyond the glass, her scientific worldview crumbling with each passing second. Your people aren't colonists, she whispered. You're planetary engineers. Dr. Okafor's eyes reflected the bioluminescent light from above. We prefer the term evolutionary partners. The moon adapts to us, we adapt to it, and together we become something neither could be alone. The young technician, Aja, she called herself, noticed the medical officer's mandibles twitching in distress. Is something wrong, Dr. Vexmore? She asked, pronouncing the complex Zathari name with perfect inflection. These adaptations, Vexmore managed, her translator struggling to convey the mixture of awe and concern in her harmonics. The radiation resistance alone would require hundreds of generations of selective breeding under conventional methods. Edja smiled, tapping the side of her temple where a faint pattern of circuits glowed beneath her skin. We don't use conventional methods. Each generation builds upon the success of the previous one, guided by the colony's evolutionary algorithms. She led the medical team into a chamber that hummed with energy. Suspended in the center were translucent pods containing what appeared to be developing human embryos, but with subtle differences visible even to alien eyes. Generation 12, Aja explained. They'll have improved calcium absorption to account for the lower gravity environment and enhanced visual processing for the specific light spectrum of our artificial suns. You're engineering your own children, Vexmore stated, her tone neutral but her posture revealing her discomfort. We're preparing them for the world they'll inherit, Aja corrected gently. just as our parents did for us, and their parents before them. The difference is we use technology to accomplish in decades what would take millennia through natural selection. Meanwhile, in the computing center, Admiral Vexnar watched as the chief engineer, a man named Surya, placed his hands directly into one of the nutrient baths containing the crystalline computers. The crystals immediately responded, changing color and orientation. Neural interfacing without implants, Surya explained, noticing the Admiral's fascination. The crystals recognize individual users through bioelectric patterns. They don't just process data, they form relationships with their operators. And if the operator dies? Vexnar asked. A shadow passed over Surya's face. The system mourns. There's no other word for it. Productivity decreases for approximately 3 days, then gradually returns to normal as it adjusts to new users. He guided his hands through the fluid in a complex pattern, causing holographic displays to form in the air above the bath. These computers aren't tools in the conventional sense. They're partners. Across the room, a team of Zathari engineers were examining the gravitational energy harvesters, elegant structures that somehow captured and stored the minute fluctuations in the gravitational field between the Moon and its parent planet. The crystals remember energy patterns? Asked the lead engineer, her antennae vibrating with skepticism. Not just remember, they anticipate, replied her human counterpart. The gravitational relationship between celestial bodies follows predictable patterns with unpredictable variations. Our crystals learn those patterns and compensate for the variations before they occur. As the various teams regrouped, Science Officer Turvak approached Admiral Vexnar, her normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. "Admiral, these technologies violate fundamental principles of galactic science," she whispered. "Their computing systems operate on quantum entanglement principles we theorized but never achieved. Their energy harvesting defies 3 established laws of thermodynamics, and their genetic modifications." She paused, struggling for words. "Speak freely, Turvak," Vexnar encouraged. "They're not just adapting to their environment, Admiral. They're evolving toward something specific, something planned." The medical officer's scans showed genetic markers that appear to be dormant now, but designed to activate under certain conditions. Vexnar's compound eyes reflected the bioluminescent lighting. "What kind of conditions?" "We don't know," Turvak admitted. "But whatever these humans are becoming, it's by deliberate design, not desperate survival. The question is..." The cultural attaché Zinvex lingered after the dance performance, studying the living walls as they slowly returned to their normal patterns. A human choreographer approached, her movements as fluid as the dance itself. "The architecture responds differently to each performer," she explained, placing her palm against the wall. The surface rippled beneath her touch, creating concentric patterns of light. "No 2 performances are ever identical. The colony itself is a participant in our art." "How do you rehearse with such variability?" Zinvex asked, genuinely curious. The choreographer laughed, a musical sound that triggered a harmonic response from the walls themselves. "We don't rehearse for precision. We train for dialogue. The dancers learn to speak with the colony through movement, and the colony answers." Later, attending a classroom session at Governor Chen's invitation, Zinvex watched children no more than 8 Earth years old engaged in what the humans called integrative problem-solving. The instructor presented a challenge involving resource allocation, architectural design, and social psychology simultaneously. "This isn't how education typically functions," Zinvex commented to Chen as they observed from behind a one-way viewing panel. "Most species train specialists who then collaborate. Specialization creates silos," Chen replied. "We discovered that minds encouraged to make connections across disciplines develop fundamentally different neural pathways. Our children don't learn subjects, they learn systems thinking." A young boy at the front of the class presented his solution, a holographic model showing not just a physical structure but overlays representing social interactions, resource flows, and even emotional well-being indicators. That child just integrated architectural engineering with social dynamics and resource management, Zinvex noted, antenna vibrating in amazement. In my culture, that would require a team of experts from 3 different disciplines. And in that coordination, valuable insights are often lost, Chen said. Integration happens in individual minds here, not in committee meetings. As they toured a dispute resolution chamber, Zinvex watched a heated argument between colonists regarding water allocation for a new agricultural section. Rather than seeking compromise, the mediator deliberately intensified certain points of disagreement, while a neural interface recorded the participants' brain activity. This seems counterproductive, Zinvex observed as the argument grew more passionate. Watch, Chen instructed. Sure enough, as the discussion reached peak intensity, one participant suddenly proposed an entirely novel solution that incorporated elements from both sides, but transcended their original positions. The neural interface flashed, capturing the moment of insight. Productive disagreement, Chen explained. Our mediators are trained to guide conflicts toward innovation rather than settlement. When properly directed, cognitive friction generates heat but also light. That evening, attending a community gathering, Zinvex noticed something else remarkable: the absence of status markers among the colonists. Clothing was functional rather than decorative. Living spaces were allocated based on need rather than rank. And in conversations, ideas were evaluated on merit regardless of who proposed them. How do you maintain order without clear hierarchies? Zinvex asked a colony elder as they shared a meal of engineered foods that somehow captured the essence of Earth cuisines lost to time. The elder, a woman whose age was difficult to determine due to the subtle genetic modifications, considered the question thoughtfully. Hierarchy isn't absent, it's fluid, she explained. Leadership shifts based on context. In a medical emergency, our doctors lead. During environmental adjustments, our engineers take command. No one leads always. Everyone leads sometimes. She gestured around the communal dining space where hundreds of colonists interacted with easy familiarity. What appears chaotic to outside observers is actually a complex adaptive system. We don't seek stability through rigidity, but through responsive flexibility. Zinvex's cultural training had prepared him for many human variations, but nothing like this. You've created more than a colony, he realized. You've created an entirely new human society. Not just human, the elder corrected with a knowing smile. But that's tomorrow's revelation. In the Zathari flagship's communication center, Admiral Vexnar watched the unfolding chaos across multiple screens. The Galactic Concorde's emergency session had devolved into shouting matches between representatives of 17 species. The Vorlath ambassador, a reptilian being notorious for measured responses, was now threatening military action. This is unprecedented, muttered Communications Officer Rilzar. The Concorde hasn't been this divided since the Proxima incident. Footage of New Terra's internal terraforming technology continued playing on secondary screens. The transformation of barren lunar material into living ecosystems had been leaked by someone in the Zathari delegation. Markets across 3 sectors had already crashed as terraforming corporations saw their stock values plummet. Admiral, called a junior officer, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures entering the system. Warships, at least 15 vessels from 4 different factions. Governor Chen appeared at the door of the communications center, escorted by Zathari security. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the surrounding tension. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the communication array. Without waiting for permission, she placed a small crystalline device on the console. Immediately, the screens flickered and reorganized. New data streams appeared, showing positions of ships the Zathari sensors hadn't detected, hidden human vessels in strategic positions throughout the system. "You have a fleet," Vexnar stated, mandibles clicking in surprise. "We have deterrence," Chen corrected. "Automated defense platforms primarily, but enough to make any aggression extremely costly." She manipulated the crystal, bringing up a new display showing the moon itself. Complex energy signatures pulsed throughout its structure. The moon is the primary defense system, she explained. 3 centuries of integration with our technology has transformed it at the quantum level. Any attack would trigger a resonance cascade that would be unpleasant for the attackers. You're threatening to destroy yourselves along with any aggressors, Vexnar said, studying the energy patterns. Chen smiled. Not at all. We would survive, protected deep within the lunar structure. The cascade only projects outward. Before Vexnar could respond, the crystal pulsed, and new communication channels opened automatically. On 12 separate screens appeared human faces, men and women of varying appearances, but all bearing the same serene confidence as Chen. May I introduce the governors of what you might call our sister colonies, Chen said. New Atlantis in the Cygnus Reach, Gaia's Cradle in the Taurus Dark Zone. 10 others, each established with different evolutionary and technological directives. The Zathari officers stared in disbelief. These regions were all considered uninhabitable or had been explicitly avoided due to dangerous stellar phenomena. Impossible, whispered Science Officer Turvac. The radiation levels in the Cygnus Reach alone would require specific evolutionary adaptations, completed the woman on the corresponding screen, her skin bearing a faint luminescence that suggested significant genetic modification. Just as New Terra's inhabitants adapted to subterranean life, my people adapted to high radiation environments. The Confederation's apparent technological backwardness was deliberate, Chen explained. A carefully cultivated image while our hidden colonies pursued different paths of development. We recognized early that humanity needed to diversify beyond a single evolutionary trajectory to survive long-term. As they spoke, tactical displays showed the approaching warships slowing, clearly detecting the previously hidden defenses. Several began to withdraw to safer distances. We didn't expect discovery for another 50 years, Chen admitted. Your arrival accelerated our timetable, but contingencies exist. They always have. Vexnar studied the human with new understanding. Your colony isn't an anomaly or a forgotten settlement. It's part of a coordinated long-term strategy spanning centuries. The longest game, Chen agreed. And now the galaxy will have to decide how to play the next round. The demonstration of bacterial swarms transforming toxic materials continued in the center of New Terra's expanded council chambers. Representatives from 17 species watched with expressions ranging from disgust to fascination as blackened sludge, mining waste from the Dorlath system, gradually transformed into building material with crystalline properties. The process takes hours, not decades, explained Dr. Marcus Way, moving among the delegates. The bacteria communicate at the quantum level, coordinating their actions with a collective intelligence that grows more sophisticated with each generation. The Freelian ambassador, a gas phase being contained within an environmental suit, moved closer to examine the transformation. And you offer this freely, without patents or licensing agreements. We offer the approach, not just the outcome, Governor Chen clarified from her position at the council table. Any world that wishes to partner with us will receive not only the bacterial colonies, but training in how to develop their own symbiotic technologies. Cultural imperialism, declared the Vorlath representative, slamming a scaled fist on the table. You expect us to adopt your philosophical framework along with your technology. We expect nothing, Chen replied calmly. We offer a path that worked for us. Each world will develop its own relationship with these principles. As the debate continued, Admiral Vexnar conferred with the Zathari High Council via secure quantum link. Their initial skepticism had transformed into cautious interest after their scientists verified the human claims. The principles violate no known ethical boundaries, Vexnar reported, and the potential benefits for world-suffering ecological collapse are substantial. The eldest counselor's image flickered as she leaned forward. You believe these humans are sincere in their offer. I believe they're playing a longer game than we can yet perceive, Vexnar admitted. But their immediate proposals appear genuine. A small disturbance interrupted the council proceedings as a delegation from Iridia, a world with rapidly failing life support systems, approached Chen directly, bypassing diplomatic protocols. "Our people have 8 standard years before our atmosphere becomes unbreathable," their leader stated, voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "We've tried everything. If your methods can help us, we are willing to embrace them completely." Chen's expression softened. A seed colony of 30 specialists could begin work immediately. Within 6 months, your atmospheric degradation would halt. Within 3 years, regeneration would begin. The lights flickered across the colony as she spoke, and the walls pulsed with unusual patterns. Several alien delegates stepped back nervously, but Chen merely smiled. "As I mentioned, growing pains. The entire moon is entering a new phase of development." The Iridian representative seemed not to notice, focused entirely on hope after decades of desperation. "You speak of partnership rather than assistance. What exactly does this entail?" Chen gestured, and the central display changed to show a complex network of connections between various systems: biological, technological, social, and environmental. "Planetary bodies aren't merely resources to be exploited," she explained. "They're potential partners in an evolutionary dialogue. What we offer isn't a technological fix, but a fundamental shift in relationship. Your people would learn to communicate with your world at the molecular level, to listen to its needs as it responds to yours." The representative from the Galactic Scientific Consortium, a multi-species organization, stepped forward. "You're suggesting consciousness in planetary bodies." "Not consciousness as you understand it," Chen clarified, "but a form of complex adaptive intelligence that can be engaged with productively. The moon we inhabit isn't merely our home, it's our collaborator." As she spoke, the floor beneath them vibrated slightly, almost like a purr of agreement. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, but the Iridians moved closer, fascinated. "We accept your offer," the Iridian leader declared. "Our world has nothing left to lose, and everything to gain." 2 other delegations immediately stepped forward with similar requests, while the Vorlath and their allies withdrew to the far side of the chamber, visibly disturbed. Admiral Vexnar watched the divisions forming with growing concern. "The galaxy is fracturing along ideological lines," he murmured to Chen. "It's not fracturing," she replied quietly. "It's evolving. Differentiation always precedes integration at a higher level." Admiral Vexnar's exoskeleton reflected the sunlight. Actual sunlight filtering through the thin but growing atmosphere of New Terra's surface. Around him, tenacious plants adapted from the colony's genetic library spread across what had been barren regolith just months earlier. Some bore flowers that shouldn't have been possible in the still harsh conditions, their petals tracking the distant sun with mathematical precision. "Remarkable," he said, kneeling to examine a cluster of crystalline growths that seemed to function as both plants and environmental monitors. "They're communicating with the bacterial colonies in the soil." Governor Chen, now bearing the formal title of Minister of Evolutionary Development within the restructured Galactic Concord, nodded. "They regulate growth based on available resources and atmospheric conditions. Nothing is wasted, everything is information." In the year since first contact, 17 worlds had adopted variations of the New Terran approach. The results had surpassed even the most optimistic projections. Planets deemed ecologically dead were showing signs of recovery. Atmospheres that had been deteriorating for centuries were stabilizing. Species on the brink of extinction were finding new niches in evolving ecosystems. The Vorlath request was unexpected, Vexnar noted, rising to his full height, given their initial hostility. "Desperation is a powerful motivator," Chen replied. "Their homeworld's core instability left them no alternatives. Pride becomes secondary to survival." A shuttle approached in the distance, bearing the markings of the Galactic Concord's newly formed integration cores, specialists from New Terra and its sister colonies, paired with scientists from various worlds. This team would be escorted by Vexnar to the Vorlath homeworld, once bitter enemies of both humans and Zathari. Have you seen the latest reports from Iridia? Chen asked as they watched the shuttles approach. Their atmospheric regeneration is proceeding at twice the projected rate. Their people have embraced the symbiotic approach with remarkable dedication. And the neural integration? Vexnar questioned, his tone revealing lingering concerns. Chen smiled. Completely voluntary, as agreed. Though 80% of their population has opted for the basic interface, they say it helps them feel their world healing. The neural technology developed on New Terra had been perhaps the most controversial aspect of their approach. Direct interfaces that allowed users to perceive environmental data as sensory input. Critics called it the first step toward assimilation. Advocates described it as genuine communion with their planetary home. As the shuttle landed, a group of colonists emerged from an access point in the lunar surface, their movements perfectly coordinated as they carried cultivation equipment. Their eyes, some modified for the harsh light, others protected by specialized lenses, reflected a shared purpose that transcended individual identity without erasing it. What happens when the integration is complete? Vexnar asked, watching the colonists work. When New Terra is fully transformed. Chen's expression became contemplative. That's the question we've been exploring for 3 centuries. The answer appears to be that integration is never truly complete. There is always further evolution, deeper communion, new possibilities emerging from the partnership. She gestured toward the stars visible, even in the daytime through the thin atmosphere. Already our sister colonies are discovering pathways we never anticipated. New Atlantis has developed semi-aquatic adaptations that allow them to directly process information from their ocean world's complex currents. Gaia's cradle has pioneered photosynthetic skin augmentations that may eventually eliminate the need for external food sources. You're becoming different species, Vexnar observed. We're becoming appropriate responses to different environments, Chen corrected, while maintaining our essential humanity through shared values and ongoing communication. As they boarded the shuttle, Vexnar took a final look at the transformed lunar landscape. What had been a barren satellite was now visibly alive, its surface bearing the first signs of what would eventually become a fully habitable world. When your ancestors hid beneath this moon's surface, he said thoughtfully, did they imagine this outcome? They imagined something, Chen replied. But imagination has limits. Reality, when approached as a partnership rather than a resource, reveals possibilities beyond what any single mind can conceive. The shuttle doors closed as they prepared for departure. Through the viewport, New Terra receded, a once dead moon now pulsing with life, its surface bearing the first delicate patterns of what would eventually become oceans and forests, and something entirely new, the physical manifestation of a 3-century dialogue between humans and their home. The universe, Chen said softly, has been waiting for this conversation to begin.